Thank you, Kim. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This is a meeting for the second community workshop of the State Route 233 Robertson Boulevard Corridor Planning Study. My name is Evelyn Espinosa. I'm Associate Regional Planner with the Madera County Transportation Commission, or MCTC. This corridor planning study, just as a reminder, is funded by the SB1 Sustainable Communities Planning Grant. And this program assists agencies with local or regional multimodal transportation improvements. And this is with the hopes of encouraging alternative methods of transportation via, walking, biking, public transit, rideshare, etc. Due to this, MCTC retained TJKM as the consultant team to create this multimodal corridor plan for State Route 233 and also RTS. So Kim from RTS will be facilitating this meeting, and then Yanlin and Divya and then Ruta from TJKM will be presenting today's meeting. So I'll hand it over to you, Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Evelyn. And again, welcome everybody. The project team has been really busy since we had our kickoff meeting with the public back in September 2019. At this point, it's been almost a year ago. And so with special thanks, of course, to City of Chowchilla and Caltrans, our partners on this, and as well as the SB1 funding that also came from Caltrans. I also want to thank the stakeholder committee. They've been a great help in helping narrow down some of these alternatives that the technical team at TJKM have come up with. And I think you'll be very pleased to see some of the potential concepts that we'll be presenting today. A couple of housekeeping things. I will be sharing my screen shortly with the presentation. And of course, you always have the opportunity to raise your hand if you have questions as we're moving through the presentation. And there will be opportunity at the end of the presentation for additional Q&A. Joe Miller, also with Regional Government Services, will be helping me to moderate, and so she'll be monitoring the chat box as well as watching for raised hands. So I appreciate her assistance. And then a special shout out to Beatrice Mayers with the City of Chowchilla, who is here to provide interpretation for anybody that would require or would prefer to hear the presentation in Spanish. And I'll be talking about that as soon as the presentation is put up. But there will be two options. One, if you happen to be on the Zoom call, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button that says interpretation. All you need to do is click that button and then specify Spanish as the language, and Beatrice will then be able to see that you've requested that, and she will translate in real time as the presentation is going forward. The other option, and I'll talk about this as soon as I get the slide presentations up, but there is a separate call-in if you're on the phone instead of on the computer for the Zoom meeting. And I'll talk about that as soon as we get the presentation up. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll be ready to go. Okay, very good. Project team, do you have the presentation up in front of you?
Yep.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
Very good. So here's our agenda. So you've heard from me and you've heard from Evelyn, and I will advance the slide and we'll let Ian get started. My apologies. I'm going to go back one time. There we go. I did promise to talk about the translation. So as I said earlier, you can see here on this slide that there's the interpretation button at the bottom. It looks like a little globe, and that's what you'd click if you'd like to hear the presentation in Spanish. And if you're on the phone and want to join by phone only, that number is area code 650-242-4929. And the meeting ID is 148-692-5263. And if anybody on the phone needs that repeated, just raise your hand and we'll be happy to share that again. Okay. And Ian, I turn it over to you.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you, Kim. My name is Ian Lin, and I'm also part of the project team working on this project. For those who are not familiar with the project, this corridor plan study is essentially the State Rail 233 Robertson Boulevard between 152 interchange, passing the 99 interchange all the way to Route 19. And that is going to be the yellow line highlighted on the screen. The project puts an emphasis on the Downtown Chowchilla area from Front Street to 15th Streets, which will be the squared area outlined on the same map. So the overarching, yeah, thank you, Kim. So the overarching goal of the project is really to, again, to come up with streetscape improvements that would enhance safety and mobility for all travel modes, including for those who walk in the downtown area, who ride a bicycle through downtown, who take a bus, and also for people who take their car, drive through the downtown area. And as we developed the concepts, we did consider a lot of elements that will serve all ages and abilities. And we make sure to accommodate all purpose of visiting the area, especially for, you know, the children who go to school there, for people who go downtown to shop and dine, and for also for the residents who live right adjacent to the area. Next, please. So what have we really done so far? So since 2019, the project team has done lots of research and analysis on existing railway system. You know, the traffic conditions, the traffic safety hotspots, and we talked about topics such as, you know, is Robertson Boulevard heavily used by trucks? Or, you know, what is the bicycle riding experience out there? And in February this year, we presented this piece of findings to the Chowchilla Planning Commission, as well as one at the Madera CTC board. We have also done extensive public outreach right from the get-go. In April of this year, we published this community outreach summary report, which is kind of like a midway summary, since we're still in the process of soliciting feedback from the public. But anyway, in that report, we documented all the greatest input from the residents, businesses, and also stakeholders. And we also developed some concept alternatives, which we would like to present to you today for more feedback and suggestions. And lastly, not too long time ago, we held a stakeholder advisory committee meeting in June with the stakeholders to go through some of the initial ideas we came up with and received comments from them. And all these materials are published on the website. So we do want to ask you to visit the website, which is chowchillacorridorplan.com, to check it out if you haven't done so. So now back to Kim. She's going to talk a little bit more about the outreach activities, what we have done and what we have heard so far from the community.
Great. I won't be long on this part of the presentation because many of you have been involved in these activities. But yeah, just to remind you that back in September of 2019, we did meet at the city of Chowchilla. We kicked off this study. We went through a series of questions, interactive polling questions with the folks that were in attendance that day. And the project team presented several different conceptions or conceptual improvements that could be implemented in the corridor and asked folks to give input on that. In conjunction with that, we launched a online poll or an online survey to which we had great response, and a large number of the folks that responded to that were parents of school-age children, which I think you'll see reflected in some of the improvements that have been proposed. The next step was the Harvest Festival, which was great fun last October around Halloween at the care facility there in Chowchilla. Again, we had good turnout and got to talk to a lot of school-age parents as well as others who use the Chowchilla Robertson Boulevard. And then we've again met with our stakeholder advisory committee. You can see a photo there of the first stakeholder meeting, and since then we've had the opportunity to meet with the stakeholders again, and that's what brings us to this community workshop today. So welcome again, everybody. And we will be looking for additional input on this. We'll have this, the questions that you'll be presented with a little bit later will also be shared on the website, and we would encourage you to forward that information to friends and colleagues and family so we can receive some additional commentary on these proposed solutions for safety in the corridor. And then just to reiterate some of the top priorities and the findings from that survey, I think it was clear that enhancing pedestrian and bicycle facilities was certainly a top priority for the people that responded to the survey, as well as those that attended the first public workshop. We did do some outreach to businesses in particular along the corridor in the downtown area. And of course, as in many downtowns, parking was a concern for the business owners. And so that's been taken into consideration in the concepts that you'll be seeing. And then a couple of the other things that were prioritized included sidewalk network. There were issues with areas where there isn't any sidewalk or the sidewalk needed repair. Marked crosswalks at intersections were a high safety concern. And that's been looked at from a couple of different lenses, and there are several different improvements that are suggested to make the crossing of Robertson Boulevard easier. Of course, ADA, which stands for the American with Disabilities Act, so ramps on the curbs that would allow those that either roll or get along in a different way to be able to access the crosswalks. And then separated bike lanes that would be buffered from the automobiles or buffered from where the cars travel. Median islands, and Ian will talk about those, or Divya will talk about those in a little bit. Those are landscaped areas in the middle of the roadway that provide some refuge for crossing of the street. And then Ian will, or Divya will also describe the Bulbouts as a way to shorten the crossing at intersections. And I'll turn it back over to our project team.
Thank you, Kim. So here we are, and we're here to discuss the concepts that have been developed for the entire study corridor. So like Ian mentioned before, the extent of the study corridor includes Robertson Boulevard from Highway 152 to SR-99, followed by Avenue 26, which starts at SR-99 and goes until Road 19. So Kim, can we go to the previous slide? Thank you. So as we can see, the corridor has been divided into 7 segments. Looking at the existing conditions of the right-of-way and surrounding land use to help develop the most applicable alternative for each segment. And as you can see here today, we will be focusing on segment C, which is the urban boulevard in downtown Chowchilla, which runs from 15th Street to Front Street. 4 different design alternatives have been developed for this segment. The underlying goal has been to improve bicycle, pedestrian, and transit facilities along with recommending traffic calming solutions to enhance safety for all modes of transportation. The design, thus prepared, takes into cognizance the surrounding land uses, existing pickup and drop-off zones around schools, as well as parking surrounding commercial areas in downtown Chowchilla. So looking at the slide here, this is alternative one, which is called road diet and parking protected bikeway. So what are the improvements suggested under this alternative? Next slide, please, Kim. So taking a closer look at the plan view, we can see here that currently the segment of Robertson Boulevard is a 4-lane roadway. So here what we are doing is we are reducing it to a 2-lane roadway to make room for parking protected bikeway. So right next to the travel lane, we have provided for on-street parking. This alternative provides for 8 feet wide parking spaces, giving us a total of 227 parking spaces all along the corridor. Right next to the parking spaces, we have flexible posts, and right next to that, we have parking protected bikeways. Landscape medians along with left turn openings are also provided at selected intersections. This alternative has ladder style crosswalks that we can see, which are recommended at locations wherever they will be feasible in accordance to California standards. Along with that, we have ADA compliant curb ramps at the corners of all intersections. The design does consider all the existing driveways, entry and exits along the corridor so that we don't block any of those existing entry and exits. Other improvements to enhance pedestrian safety include flashing beacons, yield line as we approach intersections for cars to yield to pedestrians crossing the intersections. And the existing corridor of Robertson Boulevard, in this particular segment, we have 324 parking spaces, and the proposed alternative one, we will have 227 parking spaces with losing 97 parking spaces. Let us now quickly look at the graphic which represents this alternative. Next slide, please, Kim. So looking at an existing cross section, we can see that Robertson Boulevard is a 4-lane roadway with a center turn lane and parking provided on both the sides of the corridor. And in the proposed cross section, we can see that 4-lane roadway has been reduced to a 2-lane roadway. So we have one travel lane, we have a center turn lane, and we have on-street parking along with a parking protected bikeway right next to it. Next slide, please. We also have another graphic which shows the same alternative. This is the existing condition between 7th and 8th Street. So like you can see, the existing condition, we have a 4-lane roadway with a center turn lane and parking on both the sides of the roadway. And like you can see in the proposed section, we first of all have a landscape median in the center, one travel lane in each direction. We have a parking lane, and then we have a parking protected bikeway. Next slide, please. So that was alternative 1. Coming to alternative 2, which is called separated bikeway on a 4-lane corridor. So what are really the improvements that we are suggesting as a part of this alternative? Next slide, please. So zooming into alternative 2, we are retaining the 4-lane roadway of Robertson Boulevard here with 2 lanes in each direction and a center turn lane as we approach intersections. A separated bikeway is also present So as you can see, we have bike lanes separated with wide buffers all along the corridor. Along with that, we have raised landscape median with center turn lane pockets as we approach intersections. All on-street parking in this design alternative has been eliminated. That is really the downside of this particular alternative. So we have an existing of 324 parking spaces all along this segment, and this alternative provides for 0 on-street parking spaces. The rest of the improvements, as we can see, includes ladder-style crosswalks wherever feasible and applicable according to California standards, ADA-compliant curb ramps, yield line, flashing beacons, etc. Again, all existing driveways, entry and exits, passenger loading and drop-off zones around schools have all been taken care of and are still accessible. Let us quickly go and see a graphic that depicts this alternative. Next slide, please. So looking at a graphic, this is on the left side, we can see the existing condition, which is a 4-lane roadway with a center turn lane and parking on both the sides of the roadway. And in this alternative, we are still retaining a 4-lane roadway, along with adding landscape medians and a separated bike lane. But again, we are losing parking 100% since there's no right-of-way present. So that's alternative 2. Next slide, please. Coming to alternative 3. Alternative 3 is called class 2 bikeways and bulbouts. So alternative 3 has been divided into 2 parts. First, we will look at a plan from 15th Street to 10th Street. Next slide, please. So zooming into alternative 3, so what are the improvements that we are suggesting in this alternative? So a 4-lane roadway, as you all can see, has still been retained with a center turn lane only present at signalized intersections. What is next to the travel lane is a dedicated bike lane on either side of the roadway. Considering the existing conditions of the right-of-way, parking lane in this particular segment from 15th Street to 10th Street is provided only on one side of the roadway, while it is eliminated on the other side. Along with that, we can see a raised median in the center of the roadway. What is the coolest thing about this alternative is that we have bulbouts present at the corner of every intersection, making it extremely safe for pedestrians by decreasing pedestrians' exposure to vehicles by shortening the crossing distance. Bulbouts also help reduce vehicle turn speeds by physically and visually narrowing the roadway. Left turn lanes at intersections have been eliminated as a part of this alternative. Along with that, we have ladder-style crosswalks wherever feasible and compliant to standards. We have a yield line present. We have flashing beacons, which are also recommended. Next slide, please. So looking at the second half of this section of our segment for alternative 3, what are the improvements at this alternative? We are retaining a 4-lane roadway, very similar to what we saw in the previous plan view, but left turn lanes are now restricted. Right next to the travel lane, we have a dedicated bike lane, as you can see, but the bike lane here is not protected. And as it can be seen, right next to the bike lane, we have parking, on-street parking provided on both the sides of the roadway segments through this corridor from 10th Street to Front Street. The highlight of this alternative is again bulbouts, which are again present at every corner of the intersections, making it extremely safe for pedestrians by decreasing pedestrian exposure and by shortening the crossing distance for pedestrians. This alternative 3, we are providing for 231 on-street parking spaces. And that by that, we will incur a loss of 93 parking spaces. Along with that, we have ADA compliant curb ramps, ladder style crosswalks, yield line, and flashing beacons, which are the other pedestrian safety enhancements that are recommended as a part of this alternative. Let us now see a graphic that will show us this alternative. So looking at this graphic, like we can see the existing conditions, 4-lane roadway and parking on both the sides of Robertson Boulevard. And looking at the alternative 3, like you can see, we are retaining the 4-lane roadway. We then have a dedicated bike lane, but it's not separated or buffered. And then right next to the bike lane, we have a parking lane all along the corridor. So one of the drawbacks of, actually, can we go to the previous slide? So one of the drawbacks of this alternative, actually two of the drawbacks that we really found was that we were restricting left turns, and bike lanes are not protected in this particular alternative. So we will now look at alternative 4, which, yeah, next slide, please. So alternative 4, which we call two-way left turn lane. So what are the improvements that we are suggesting as a part of this alternative is that the 4-lane roadway is reduced to a 2-lane roadway with one lane in each direction. But along with that, a two-way left turn lane is provided in the center to ensure that cars are freely able to make left turns at intersections or at driveways. Right next to the travel lane, we have a separated bike lane with buffers. And right next to the bike lane, we have provided for on-street parking on both the sides of the roadway. In this alternative, again, very similar to alternative 3, we have 231 parking spaces in total present all along the segment. The rest of the improvements are, again, very similar to alternative 3. Bulbouts have been provided at every corner of intersections, making it extremely safe for pedestrians. And along with that, we have ladder style crosswalks, ADA compliant curb ramps, flashing beacons, and as well as flashing beacons that are recommended to enhance pedestrian safety. So alternative 1, with all the all the improvements that have been suggested in alternative 3, helps us make sure that the bike lanes are protected, and also the fact that left turns are not limited anymore. In addition to that, we also conducted a traffic evaluation and found out that reducing one lane is not going to impact the day-to-day traffic demand of this segment. So yes, that is segment 4. I will now hand it over to Kim for the next section.
My apologies. Let's try that again, unmuted. So I've got a couple, actually more than a couple. I've got about 7 polling questions to ask you about the information that you just saw. So I'll be launching some polls. And if you would kindly vote for, well, not really vote, but let us know what you think about these alternatives. And I'm going to launch polling question number 1. So I'm asking you now about the first alternative that the project team presented to you. So based on the presentation for alternative 1 on segment C, can you support this alternative as a potential solution on State Route 233? And just as a reminder, this alternative included a road diet, which means they were taking out some of the travel lanes. a protected bikeway, a landscape median, and it also included the loss of approximately 84 parking spaces out of the total of 324. So if you could tell me whether or not, yes, you could support this alternative, or yes, with some modifications, which we can talk about in a moment, or no, if this alternative is not something that you could support. So I'm going to wait just a few seconds here and allow those of you that have joined us today to tell us what you think of that alternative one. And again, that was the one that had the road diet, including the protected bikeway, the landscape median. And I might point out that this is the one that had the fewest loss of parking spaces.
Kim, I think Sheila had a
Kim,
comment.
yes.
Is there going to be any discussion? I have a few questions before I can do these polls.
Oh.
Number one, we used to have landscaped medians that went to pot and weren't taken care of, and there's no water. So my one question on that is, who's going to take care of them, and what kind of water usage is going to be needed? Additionally, when you were doing your studies, did you do it when the train stops on the track and sits there for 30 minutes and we have backed up traffic on all 4 lanes going back all the way to 11th Street? That once the train moves, it takes forever to unblock all of that? Or did you not do it when you had the train situation?
Regarding the first one, and Sheila, I'm Jason Rogers. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Chowchilla.
Hey, Jason.
And thank you for your questions. Regarding the first part of it, for landscape medians, that would be the city that would take care of that, of course. We wouldn't be doing green landscape. We'd be doing xeriscaping.
Oh.
Something that requires no water, something like that. We're currently working on with somebody else on trying to design for that, for the areas that we do currently have landscaped, or rather dirtscaped right now.
Yeah.
But it is something that we're looking at, something that is minimal, something that can be maintained easily into the future, especially with the future water concerns. As to the second question that you had, I will have to turn it over to TJKM so that way they can discuss the train situation.
Yeah, and Jason, I'm sure that if you're in Chowchilla, you see where we have that on Robertson frequently.
Yeah, sometimes I have to turn back around and go back out through 16 and stuff like that.
I can't even imagine 2 lanes. I can't, it would be an absolute nightmare.
So.
Yes, thank you, Sheila, for the good comment. Yeah, we heard about that comment just once. We heard that from the stakeholders meeting as well as the on the online survey, and we did take into consideration of that, and that is why we didn't really stretch the entire streetscape concept all the way to the railroad track, and as we, and a short answer to you, and for your first part of the question, we did not do the data collection when the train passed by. So, but we heard that a lot from the community. So we did take that into consideration. And again, our streetscape improvements or concepts, it's only until Front Street. And we want to, keep the rest of the segment, namely from front to the 99 ramps, 4-lane segment.
But the backup goes all the way to 11th. Yeah. And, when you're talking about the train just going through, if it's going through normally, it's a hassle, but not that big of a deal. But it often stops on those tracks there. and there is no passing through it. And the traffic on both directions towards 99 and all the way back to 11th Street, all 4 lanes, both sides, will be bumper to bumper, and you could sit there for 45 minutes. And there's no way around it. If you're caught in the middle of that, there's no way around that. You know, if you're caught in the middle of that traffic, there's nothing to do but sit there. 2 lanes would be an absolute nightmare here. I'm not sure who thought of that, but it looks beautiful. As a matter of fact, visually, I love that one the best, but it will not work.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the comments. I believe you have encountered a lot of frustration on a daily basis, you know, as you commute in and out. And we did want to make sure, you know, we do come up with a preferred alternative eventually when we draft up the report, and hopefully that will, you know, serve all the interests as much as possible. And thank you for the comments. We're still in the process of finalizing the concept. So.
Well, I'm going to be quiet now, but my vote on poll 1 is no.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of it, Sheila, is to try to get those comments and everything and get those responses back. So that way we can determine what the public's best interest is or what they're wanting. It should be noted that the city has looked at other times on trying to mitigate that situation, either by going underneath the railroad or whatever. However, there is a large PG&E gas pipe that runs right by that area, and that prevented the city in the past from doing that. So it kind of hurt what the city was able to do. So we're trying to look at these alternatives, trying to find out what the best way moving forward is. That way that we can beautify our town and especially focus on those pedestrian and bicycle issues, safety issues for our residents.
Ian and Jason, Joffrey also had a comment he wanted to add here. If Sheila, did we address all of the points that you had?
Yeah, I only had one other question, but that's about the sidewalk, so that's not, I'll save that.
Okay, yeah, we will have Q&A at the end. So Joffrey, if this is the appropriate point, go ahead with your question. You might be muted. There we go.
I got it. So Kim, I was interested that Divya said that you had done some kind of study or assessed the impact of reducing from 4 lanes down to 2 lanes, and that it would have little impact. I mean, that's very important for the city, I think, for traffic that there is at high peak traffic. And I'd like to hear more about how that was assessed. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can take that question. So we collected traffic volume, automobile volume, 24-hour at multiple locations along Robertson Boulevard. And we based on the methodology, you know, from the state's standards. And we found that the demand on a regular, what I would say on a normal day, the demand is just a little bit passing 45%, but you got say you have the capacity of 100 and the demand is only at 45 along the majority of the corridor. You know, but there are events from Sheila that, you know, when the train stopped right there for 45 minutes, things will be backed up, and cars will be queuing, and that is also the fact. But you know, you got a 4-lane highway most of the time, only 40% are utilized, 45%.
And Ian, it's 233 after it comes off of 152 is already a 2-lane freeway coming into town, and then it splits
Right.
into a 4-lane. And then the traffic counts and everything has to be done according to state recommendations or requirements, right? Which is why we do a 24-hour period and average it out. So that way we try to get it in its normal conditions. Yeah, there's stuff that pops up at times that, you know, throws off a normal condition, but we have to assess based off of what a normal condition is for that area.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, very good. Good conversation there.
Mm-hmm.
Did everybody get an opportunity? I know we've had a few people ask a few questions. So if everybody has voted or put in their information on this poll, I'm going to go ahead and end this one, and then I'm going to move on and ask you the same question about alternative 2. So I'll give, that looks like we probably got everybody. So I'm going to end this one. And not surprising from the discussion, we were about 50% no on this one, and then we talked about some modifications and then some support for this as well. So I'm going to take this now to our next question. Oh, was there a question there? Okay. So this is looking at alternative 2, and I'll quickly remind you what alternative 2 in downtown included. So this is a 4-lane roadway, doesn't include the road diet, also has a separated bikeway, a landscaped median, but this is the one that took out all of the parking, at least the parking along this segment that we're talking about right in the downtown. So it would include the loss of 324. So I'm gonna launch the poll. The question is up there. And so again, I'll ask you if this is an alternative that you might be able to support, or you might support it with some modification, or if no, this is not an alternative that you could support. And I'll leave this open for a few seconds so people have an opportunity to give their input, and we can also take questions on this now or at the end as well. So I see that I think everyone's had the opportunity. So I will close that poll. And again, this one is not as popular as the first alternative was. So I will move on then again. And then, of course, I'm going to ask you the same question about alternative 3. And again, I'll remind you that, and I'm going to go ahead and launch this while I'm talking, this alternative included a 4-lane roadway as well as bike paths on both sides, and then a loss of a little more parking than alternative 1, but still only amounts to 91 spaces out of the total of 324 that are directly along this segment. And I see that everyone is voting. We've gotten the hang of this. And I'll leave this open for another second or two. And this seems to be, of the folks on the call, the most popular one. So I will share those results showing yes and yes with some modifications. And if anybody would like to weigh in on what modifications that they might like to share, we can certainly take that information now or wait until the end. Okay. So I would like to point out, and I don't actually have that.
Pam, really quick, Sheila was raising her hand.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I'm trying to visualize in my mind exactly what alternative 3 looked like. Didn't that still have a little strip of raised median that had some kind of a landscape or coloring in it? It had that in it, didn't it?
I I'm going to take us back. This was, is this the correct one, Divya, as far as?
Yes, yes. If we could go to the previous slide.
Mhm. Here we go.
So part of it, if we go to the previous slide.
Oh, one before. Okay.
Yeah. So you're right, Sheila.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, the segment has been divided into two parts. So part of it from 15th Street to 10th Street does have a landscape median. Yeah.
Very good. And I am going to add something in here real quick. Oh, my apologies. I am not going to try to do that. So now here we go. We did not add alternative 4, so I am going to put an alternative 4 question in. And I'm going to do this quickly, and I apologize that we didn't have this in already. And I will get Divya to tell us again what alternative 4 was and how it differed. So give me just a moment. We'll save that.
I can quickly summarize what alternative 4 was.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it was on very similar lines to alternative 3, just that instead of a 4-lane roadway, we had reduced it to a 2-lane roadway with a center, with a 2-way center turn lane to ensure that cars are freely able to make left turns at intersections or at driveways. Other than that, we did have a separated bike lane with buffers and also on-street parking all along the segment. So that this particular alternative gave us 231 parking spaces in total.
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you for bearing with me while I was putting this question and adding this question to our poll today. So based on what Divya just said, I'm asking if you can support the alternative 4 as it's been described to you here.
I'm sorry to be talking so much. Well, not really. Divya, did I understand you to say it remains 4, however, there's some bleed in so that the turns are more protected? Is that what you said for 4?
No, it actually, we have one travel lane in each direction. So it is a two-lane roadway with a center turn lane, which helps you take turns all along the roadway segment. So the center turn lane is throughout the roadway segment.
Kim, could you go to that slide, please?
Yes, I would be happy to. Oh, good grief, guys. I'm sorry. Bear with me just a second. This is what happens when you're doing things on the fly.
We're not going anywhere.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. Well, bear with me for 1 second.
PowerPoint stuck?
Yeah, this
You
happened.
might stop share and then go ahead and reshare.
Yep, I think I'm going to do that.
Well, while you're doing that, maybe I could share something, just my point of view of the project. First, I wanted to compliment the people who did the drawings. Being an engineer, and I think the drawings have been well done, and things are really well illustrated from different perspectives. With all the different alternatives presented, as a cyclist, I'm still am not very comfortable riding on Robertson Boulevard. And I think that for me, I would rather travel down King Street or Trinity Street to get to where I need to be on Robertson. So the design that I would like the best is a one that has left turn lanes, that has bulbouts to reduce the amount of time for pedestrians to cross, and no bike lane.
I think all of these included a bike lane. Are you looking for a protected bike lane, one that's separated from the road? Is that what you were looking for?
So Jason, the difficulty with the protected bike lane is it doesn't allow easily for a left turn for the bicycle. To do a left turn, you need to get into the center lane, and that means crossing over, either getting in, fully occupying, if it's just one lane in my direction. But you have to get out a ways before the turn. So protected bike lanes are really nice. But they have the disadvantage of not easily being able to make a left turn. Now, alternative 4 we've got up here, and I'm not sure if the bike lane actually protected.
I think that bike lane's only protected on what, alternative 1?
Right. So
Yeah.
for alternative 2, we are only having the stripe buffer separating vehicles and bicycles.
That's true. Yeah. That would not be uncomfortable for me to ride. I would feel safe doing that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and that one eliminates all parking along Robertson.
Oh, yeah. So the alternative that was
trade-offs on
just
the-
up here was number 4.
Yeah, question for this question, it's alternative 4 that we're voting on now.
And I can relaunch this if folks would like to give a different opinion on this. As it was, 2 people said yes, one said yes with a modification, and one said no. So I am going to relaunch that and let everybody re-input if they would like to. There we are. Feel free to have more discussion or to go ahead and let us know. Either yes with modification, or no to the alternative 4.
Oh, wait.
Very good. Thank you very much. And it looks like we were evenly split to yes and no. And with that, I have just a few more questions. I promise these will be easier. So this is just asking your perception of whether or not the input that's been given to this point has been expressed in the alternatives that you've looked at. So do the concepts that they've been presented address sort of the dual concerns of needing parking in downtown Chowchilla, as well as the need for increased safety of bicyclists and pedestrians? And I'm going to launch that poll, and this really goes to just the discussion that we just had. So if you can go ahead and let us know what you think about the increased safety of bicyclists and pedestrians under the 4 alternatives that were presented. And very good. It sounds like in general, you do think that the parking and safety issues have both been addressed. So now I'm going to ask this question a little bit differently to talk about those of you that do balk and I'm sorry, let's try that again, walk or bike in the downtown corridor, as to whether or not you feel like it would make you more likely to use the corridor with the improvements that have been suggested. So again, we have yes, yes with modifications, or no, and we can again discuss these at the end as well. Very good, you guys are getting really fast with this. So it sounds like the project team has done a good job of addressing the biking and walking safety issues, and that you feel more likely to use the facility. That's great to know. And quickly, we're going to go to poll 6. And as I had mentioned early on, a lot of the people that answered the poll had school-aged children. And so we're asking you now whether or not the concepts as they've been presented to you, do they address residents with and without school-aged children as well? There was some special consideration given to the drop-off and pickup point along the corridor, as well as the safety of crossing the street. I'll wait a few more seconds. It sounds like in general, that's great to know. Yes, that was a topic of quite a bit of discussion. And I know that having a school on a busy intersection and the pickup and drop off points can be of concern. Okay, and we're down to my last question of the evening. Hopefully you may have some more. But now we're asking you about priorities, because as Ian and the project team have mentioned at various times, this is a planning document, so we're looking at what is possible on the corridor, and this gives us the opportunity, or MCTC and the city, to locate funding from various different federal, state, and local sources. And so we're asking what would be something you'd want to see done early. So I'm going to launch this poll, and I'm going to continue to chat a little bit about what these mean. So what we're asking here really is early on improvements. So what are some of the improvements that could be made that would have the greatest impact for you, considering that some funding may not be available in the early years of trying to implement this plan. So I'm going to ask, and you can pick more than one, up to 3 of these alternatives. So the road diet, which would of course reduce the travel lanes, we talked a little bit about that. The protected bikeways, parking protected, or just separated bikeways. And that was a difference in a couple of the alternatives. Bikeways without parking protection, so that was the one where they're striped, but they're not divided away from where the cars travel. There were buffers with flexible posts, and there were, you could see some of those in the alternatives as Divya went through those. The flashing beacons, so those are the high profile or high visibility beacons that help warn automobiles that somebody is attempting to cross. The landscape medians, which also generated a little bit of discussion earlier. And then, of course, the American with Disabilities compliant curb ramps that would allow those that are mobility challenged to also be able to use the corridor in a more robust way. So it looks like everybody's had an opportunity, and I'm going to end that poll. And I will share these results with you. This will be very helpful information for the project team. It looks like ADA compliant curb ramps is something that all the participants noticed and think would be a good idea. We've got flashing beacons, the protected bikeways, and then the road diet as well. So the project team can take those poll results and use those to finalize some of these concepts. So those were all the questions that I had for you. I am going to move us on to the next slide and let Ian talk to you a little bit about what the next steps are, and then we can open up for Q&A. and have a little more discussion about this. We do have plenty of time, so there isn't a big hurry. It's 6:03 at this point, and the project team's committed to hang out until at least 7 o'clock if needed.
Thank you. Thanks, Kim, again, and thanks, Divya. So yeah, before we jump to the Q&A session, we would like to update you on what is going to happen after this meeting. First of all, we will continue to solicit feedback until the end of August. So if you haven't taken a survey or left a feedback on the website, please do so. So we have your concerns collected and covered. Secondly, we will be updating and finalizing the corridor design concepts for staff review. Concurrently, we will also be drafting the corridor plan report, which is again a planning document which we explore tons of options like today. And that will be taken to City Council as well as the Madera County Transportation Commission board for final adoption. Yeah, and I think with that, that's about the next steps, and we should open up for Q&A.
And this picture seems like it was taken 1,000,000 years ago when we were all together at the City of Chowchilla City Hall.
Yeah.
No masks.
No masks. Pre-COVID. We're allowed to mingle.
Everybody sing together. Yeah.
Okay, with that, I'm going to stop the screen share so I can have a better look at anybody who might be asking questions.
Kim, Sheila has a question.
Oh, very good.
Of course I do.
Thank you.
We talked a lot about the bikes and we talked a lot about the cars, but we didn't talk very much about the walkers. And I'm wondering how much of the sidewalk is involved in this, and will all of our cracks and angles and everything else that's happening with our sidewalk, will that be remedied?
So I think I can answer part of it, and maybe Jason can take it over for the rest. Yes, for the concepts, we're only working on making changes within the curbs, meaning from the curb to the north and to the curb in the south. But we do propose a lot of pedestrian improvements, treatments, such as the ladder style crosswalk and the curb extension, where you call it a Bulbouts at the intersections that will shorten the crossing distance. And maybe Jason can take the questions regarding sidewalk and the maintenance part of it.
Yeah, so the sidewalks down Robertson, since they're on 233, are in the right-of-way of Caltrans. So Caltrans has all the right and say on those. And what they defer to is the state and highway code, which states that the responsibility of repairing sidewalks, curb and gutter is the responsibility of the property owner. So if they get a complaint regarding sidewalks, then they notice the property owner, and then the property owner has to fix it. We've gone a bit further than that. We recently did an ADA assessment, and we noted all the deficiencies on Robertson. We've sent that to Caltrans, so that way they're aware of it. But we've also partnered with Caltrans on a few issues lately, where they've supplied some materials for some of our bigger issues, sort of potholes on the sidewalk. And they've supplied those, and we've gone out there with our limited staff and done some of that work. It's not perfect, or it's not a perfect way to fix all of Robertson, but we're trying to work with Caltrans on addressing those issues. And that's what we're trying to do right now. And especially right now, try to do it in a way that doesn't negatively impact businesses any more than what they already are through COVID.
Yeah, because the ADA ramps at the corners are wonderful and direly needed. But if you're in that wheelchair and you're going down the sidewalk and you can't navigate the sidewalk, then it doesn't really matter.
Right. And then one thing that we also do as well is we try to seek outside grants, such as ATP, Active Transportation Project grants through the state. We did that a few years ago and did some improvements in some of those curb ramps on Robertson, further on down by 15th down to, I think, 10th Street. And we applied for funding last year. However, the state didn't award us any grant funds on that. But we try to go after those, and we try to find them, we try to get them, and we try to partner with the state so that way we can make those adjustments. Sidewalk, unfortunately, is very expensive for property owners, for cities, and we try to work where we can and find funding where we can in order to meet those needs.
Thank you.
No problem.
I swore I wasn't going to do that this time. I wasn't looking at my giant sticky that said unmute yourself. I was just going to say, Sheila, those are great questions because funding is such an issue, especially right now. And it's studies like these that actually put the city and Madera County Transportation Commission in a much better position as they try to go after grants, because they've actually gone out and studied and particularly talked to residents and kind of assessed what would be the best and high priority types of improvements to do. So hopefully this will put everybody in a little bit better position to try to go after some of those grant funds. And Joe, did we have anybody else, or is there anything else from the project team perhaps?
I could say a little bit. Am I on here?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so for bikes, one of the things that would be useful at the signal lights is to have marks where bikes can trip the signals without having to maneuver the bike over to a post to push a button just on the roadway. And then another thing on the overpass, I think the sharrows are a really good idea, and the work and most of the bike the markings for the bike lanes going up there are pretty good. The let's see, the eastbound side, I would do the bike lane a little bit different from my experience riding there, and I could talk to someone about that later. But going up and over the overpass, they repaved it at some time, and they didn't repave all the shoulders. So there's a large, there's like for the shoulder, it's probably about 4 feet wide, and 1 foot of that is smooth. The rest of it is bumpy and not so pleasant to ride on. So I guess, I don't know if Jason would help negotiate with Caltrans to make some improvements there.
I can bring that up with Caltrans, especially at our next MCTC meeting. We have a member from council that's on the MCTC board, and we do have a portion of that where council members or board members get to discuss with Caltrans issues that they have. And it's a good way to discuss some of these issues that come up.
I'm sorry, and what was the issue that was raised? This is David with Caltrans.
Oh, hi, Mr. Fidel. So
Yes.
on the overpass, currently the shoulders have about a foot worth of smooth pavement that's nice for a bicycle to ride on, and about 3 feet of bumpy cracked pavement. And that's not, as bicyclists, we would tend to avoid riding in that area because we don't have suspension of a motor vehicle, and also because there are more ram's head thorn hazards in those cracks waiting to puncture our tires.
Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. You mean talking? In this case, it would be to the right of that 1 foot shoulder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, but that's on the local road side, isn't it?
No, that's part of the overpass and part of the
Is
right.
it? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I sit on that MCTC, so I'll bring this up to our deputy director of our traffic operations and maintenance, and see if there's anything we can do about that.
Great. So the other thing on the overpass that would be nice for pedestrians, because pedestrians do use the overpass, is to put a fence on the pedestrian side of, at least on the pedestrian side of the overpass. It would feel safer, I think.
Right. Okay.
I do believe that is one of the oldest bridges now in the. So.
There was recently a discussion about that bridge on the Facebook group that you were born in or grew up in Chowchilla, and someone said it was constructed in 1957.
Yeah, that's the information that I have.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, David, for having Jeffrey's question in mind, and you too, Jason, for that.
Speaking of that, I've seen people on wheelchairs going over that overpass too. And when they come onto the town side of it, it's just gravel. There's nothing smooth for a wheelchair to run on there. Will that be addressed?
Well, I do know there's some future plans for some improvements to our ramps. I'm sure it'll eventually include the bridge. Yeah, the bridge, like you said, it's an old bridge design. Designed probably mainly for ag at the time. But now that Chowchilla's grown, there's some proposed development on the east side of 99, which is pushing the need for some improvements to the off ramps. Ultimately, that bridge just needs to be replaced and brought up to current design. But again, the funding is always the issue. So we do have some interim improvement design concepts. And I'm sure that would include, repaving the overpass portion, several hundred feet past the roundabout. But we're talking probably at least 5-10 years out. So not anytime soon, but there might be some local assistant funding that we may possibly look at. I can mention it to our local assistant engineer, see what type of funding can be available for that type of work.
Yeah, and just to add in on that, and that's kind of a separate project from this, but the city is currently working with MCTC and Caltrans on completing environmental on interchange improvements on 99 North and 99 South, to include 2 roundabouts and a secondary bridge over there with ADA improvements. And we expect the environmental to be completed next year.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then we have to go and design stuff like that. So like David said, we're probably about minimum 5 years out, if not a little longer.
Yeah.
Well, great. Excellent discussion, everyone. We may have been a relatively small group, but small but mighty. Lots of really good information and suggestions. Please know how much your time is appreciated by everybody in the group. And whoever was on, and we could hear little children in the background, that always makes my day to hear somebody's family in the background enjoying themselves on what's really a warm afternoon. So with that, if there are no other comments or questions, I'll turn it over. Evelyn, if you had any parting thoughts. And then just to encourage everybody, please go to the website and encourage all your friends, family, colleagues, far-flung relatives. But thank you.
Yes, definitely. That's I would just same as Kim said. Please just share it. Ian mentioned the end of August for the anyone can submit comments. Just so everything is included in the study. I just want to say thank you for the wonderful meeting and for everybody who participated and provided all these meaningful comments. And we're looking forward to hearing more from you and other community members. I just want to say thank you for being here, today. And I know it's kind of late, but it was really, really great seeing all of you. To be honest, it was really great seeing everybody. And just one thing that I forgot to mention, if you have anyone that's interested in looking at these slides, just to be aware that these slides are going to be posted on, they are already on the website. The video will be posted on the website. And that's also available in Spanish if anyone would like to share that with anyone that will require slides in Spanish. That's been also, it's on the website as well. So that's all I have to say, and looking forward to the next part of it and what TJKM will take into consideration everything that they've heard today. So that's it for me, and thank you to the project team. Thank you, Jason and David. I was really happy to see you, and Beatrice. I really appreciate your time and being there for any Spanish speakers as well. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you. See you guys later.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate everybody's comments too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.